Thunder crackled across the night sky as Captain Marcus Thompson guided his small aircraft through the turbulent storm. With 15 years of commercial flying experience and countless emergency landings under his belt, he knew he had no choice but to set down at the small regional airport in Stater Grove. What should have been a routine emergency landing would soon become a night that would change multiple lives forever. The rain was coming down in sheets when Marcus expertly touched down on the slick runway. His passengers, an elderly couple and a young mother with her daughter, let out sighs of relief. They had diverted nearly 200 miles from their original flight path from Atlanta to Chicago, but safety always came first in Marcus's cockpit. As he helped his shaken passengers disembark and led them toward the terminal, he had no idea that his credentials, professionalism, and basic humanity were about to be questioned in the most shocking way. Officer James Barrett was having a terrible night even before the unscheduled landing. 3 domestic disturbance calls, a fender bender in the storm, and now some hotshot pilot landing without proper clearance at his small-town airport. At least, that's what he assumed when he saw the sleek private aircraft taxi to a stop. The past few months had been rough. His divorce was finally settled. He'd been passed over for promotion again, and the mounting pressures of the job were getting to him. But what happened next would force him to confront his own deeply rooted prejudices and change his life's trajectory forever. As Marcus emerged from the aircraft in his crisp pilot's uniform, complete with 4 golden stripes on his epaulettes, the first thing he noticed was the patrol car's flashing lights cutting through the rain. He dealt with law enforcement countless times during his career, routine checks, security protocols, the usual procedures. But something felt different about this encounter from the moment Officer Barrett stepped out of his vehicle, hand already resting on his holster. "You can't just land here whenever you feel like it," Barrett shouted over the wind and rain, his flashlight beamed directly in Marcus's face. "This is a restricted airfield." The officer's aggressive tone made the young mother clutch her daughter closer, while the elderly couple exchanged worried glances. Marcus maintained his professional composure, reaching slowly for his pilot's license and credentials. "Officer, I'm Captain Marcus Thompson. We diverted due to severe weather conditions. I've already radioed ahead and received clearance from the tower." Marcus's calm voice carried the weight of his experience, but Officer Barrett seemed unmoved. What happened in the next few minutes would be captured by multiple cell phones, security cameras, and later go viral across social media platforms. The confrontation escalated as Barrett refused to accept Marcus's explanation or examine his credentials properly. The officer's prejudiced assumptions about who could and couldn't be a pilot, combined with his personal frustrations, created a powder keg ready to explode. But it was Marcus's unwavering professionalism and the intervention of an unexpected ally that would turn this story from a potential tragedy into something far more profound. What none of them knew was that among Marcus's passengers was Sarah Chen, a civil rights attorney returning from a conference. As she watched the scene unfold, she knew this moment could become either another heartbreaking headline or an opportunity for real change. The presence of her legal expertise, combined with the multiple videos being recorded, would prove crucial in the aftermath of what happened next. The storm continued to rage around them as the situation reached its breaking point. Lightning illuminated the scene in harsh bursts, revealing the faces of everyone involved: the frightened passengers, the increasingly agitated officer, and the composed pilot who refused to let prejudice win. But it wasn't just the weather that was about to break. A series of events was about to unfold that would reshape the lives of everyone present, especially Officer Barrett's. What happened that night at Cedar Grove Regional Airport would eventually make national headlines, spark important conversations about bias in law enforcement, and lead to significant changes in police training protocols. But more importantly, it would tell a deeply human story about confronting prejudice, finding redemption, and the power of maintaining dignity in the face of injustice. As Barrett moved to place Marcus under arrest, despite having no valid reason, no one could have predicted how this confrontation would end. The next few moments would test everyone's character, challenge long-held beliefs, and prove that sometimes the most powerful changes come from the most unexpected situations. But to understand how this story transforms from a potential tragedy into a beacon of hope and change, we need to go back to the beginning and see how a series of small choices led to this pivotal moment. What forces drove Officer Barrett to this point? How did Marcus's past experiences prepare him for this crucial moment? And most importantly, how did this stormy night become a catalyst for lasting change in Cedar Grove and beyond? The answers to these questions would emerge in the most unexpected ways, touching lives far beyond the small airport where our story begins. As the rain continued to pour and tensions reached their peak, no one could have predicted the extraordinary chain of events that was about to unfold. This is a story about more than just a confrontation between a pilot and a police officer. It's about human dignity, the courage to stand up for what's right, and the potential for real change, even in the darkest moments. But before we reveal what happened next, we need to understand the full context of that fateful night, and the surprising twist that would leave Officer Barrett regretting his actions for the rest of his life. 2 hours before the confrontation at Cedar Grove Regional Airport, Marcus Thompson had been calmly cruising at 30,000 feet, his passengers settled comfortably behind him. The weather report had warned of potential storms, but nothing that seemed particularly concerning. However, years of experience had taught Marcus to trust his instincts, and something about the rapidly forming cloud formations ahead made him uneasy. Meanwhile, Officer James Barrett was pulling into the airport parking lot for his routine patrol, his mind still churning over the argument he'd had with his ex-wife earlier that day. She called to tell them their son wouldn't be coming for his weekend visit. Again, it was the third time this month. The divorce had been messy, with accusations flying from both sides, but nothing had hurt quite like losing time with his teenage son. Barrett's fellow officers had noticed changes in him over the past year. The once friendly cop who would go out of his way to help anyone had become increasingly irritable and confrontational. His partner of 3 years had recently requested a transfer, citing personality conflicts. But nobody had stepped in, nobody had suggested counseling or time off. Instead, they watched silently as Barrett's bitterness grew, particularly toward those he perceived as more successful or privileged than himself. Sarah Chen, the civil rights attorney aboard Marcus's plane, had spent the day presenting at a conference about accountability in law enforcement. The irony of what she was about to witness wasn't lost on her. In her briefcase, she carried presentations about similar incidents, routine situations that had escalated due to unchecked bias, but she never expected to become personally involved in such a case. As the storm intensified and Marcus made the decision to divert, he followed every protocol meticulously. He radioed ahead to Cedar Grove's control tower, speaking with Night Supervisor Randy Martinez, who cleared him for emergency landing. Martinez would later become a key witness to the events that followed, his recorded conversations with Marcus proving crucial to the story's outcome. The elderly couple aboard, Robert and Margaret Whitman, had been flying to Chicago to visit their first grandchild. They'd chosen the private charter specifically because of Marcus's stellar safety record and professional reputation. Now, as they watched the confrontation unfold through the terminal windows, Margaret's hands trembled as she recorded everything on her phone, her years of civil rights activism during the 1960s flooding back with painful clarity. But there was something else about that night that no one knew yet, something that would make Officer Barrett's actions even more regrettable. Just that morning, the police department had installed new body cameras as part of a federal oversight program. Barrett's camera was recording every moment, every word, every action. The footage would later become instrumental in ways no one could have predicted. The young mother, Jessica Mills, held her daughter Emma close as she watched the scene escalate. Emma, only 6 years old, had been drawing pictures during the flight. One of them was of Captain Marcus, who had kindly given her his pilot's wings pin before takeoff. Now she couldn't understand why the police officer was being mean to her new friend, the nice pilot who had kept them safe in the storm. As Barrett's aggression increased, Marcus thought about his own father, also a pilot, who had faced similar situations decades ago. His father's words echoed in his mind. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stay calm in the face of ignorance. Those words had guided Marcus through his entire career, helping him break barriers and become one of the youngest captains in his company's history. What Officer Barrett couldn't see through his cloud of prejudice was that Marcus Thompson wasn't just any pilot. He was a decorated Air Force veteran who had flown rescue missions during natural disasters. He had saved countless lives and earned commendations for his service before transitioning to civilian aviation. The same skills that had made him a hero in the military, patience, cool-headedness, and strategic thinking, were about to serve him well in this confrontation. Unknown to everyone involved, Cedar Grove's newly elected mayor was still in her office at the municipal building adjacent to the airport. Mayor Diana Rodriguez had made police reform a cornerstone of her campaign, and what she was about to witness through her office window would test her resolve in ways she never imagined. The storm continued to intensify, almost as if nature itself was building up to the climax of this confrontation. Lightning illuminated the scene in stark bursts, casting harsh shadows across the faces of everyone involved. The wind carried voices in scattered fragments across the tarmac, where a small crowd of airport workers had begun to gather, their phones raised to capture what they sensed would be a significant moment. Sarah Chen had already pulled up the relevant statutes on her phone, documenting every violation of protocol she witnessed. But what troubled her most wasn't the legal implications. It was the look in Officer Barrett's eyes. She recognized it from other cases she'd handled. The look of a man on the edge, someone whose personal demons had pushed him to a breaking point. As Barrett moved closer to Marcus, his hand still resting on his holster, the true weight of the moment hung in the air. This wasn't just about one pilot and one officer anymore. It had become something larger, a moment that would either reinforce old prejudices or become a catalyst for change. But before anyone could intervene, before the situation could be diffused, something happened that would change everything. A development so unexpected that it would force everyone involved to confront their deepest beliefs and assumptions. The rain continued to pour, washing across the tarmac in sheets, but it couldn't wash away the tension that had built to an almost unbearable level. In the next few moments, decisions would be made that would ripple through lives far beyond Cedar Grove Regional Airport. But first, a truth would emerge that would make Officer Barrett wish he had never answered the call on this stormy night. The unexpected development that changed everything came in the form of a crackling radio transmission. "Officer Barrett, be advised." The voice belonged to dispatch operator Linda Martinez, Randy's wife and a 20-year veteran of the department. Her next words would pierce through the sound of rain and thunder, stopping Barrett in his tracks. "Captain Thompson's flight was authorized by Director Collins himself. He's transporting emergency medical supplies for Cedar Grove General." The revelation hung in the air, but instead of de-escalating the situation, it seemed to push Officer Barrett further over the edge. His face contorted with a mix of embarrassment and anger. The truth was, those medical supplies included a rare type of blood needed for emergency surgery. Surgery scheduled for Barrett's own nephew, though he didn't know it yet. Marcus Thompson stood his ground, hands visible, voice steady. "Officer, I have all the documentation right here. Let's handle this professionally." Behind him, Sarah Chen had begun quietly coordinating with other passengers, ensuring multiple angles of the confrontation were being recorded. The elderly Mrs. Whitman's hands shook as she held her phone, but her aim remained steady, capturing every moment. Inside the terminal, young Emma Mills tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mom, why is the police officer so angry? Captain Marcus saved us from the storm." Jessica Mills hugged her daughter closer, struggling to explain something she herself couldn't understand. Emma's innocent question would later become a powerful soundbite in news coverage of the incident. Airport security officer Kevin Rodriguez watched the scene unfold from the terminal doorway, torn between protocols and moral obligation. He had worked with Barrett on numerous occasions and had noticed the officer's declining mental state over the past year. Now, he faced a crucial decision: intervene and risk professional backlash, or stand by and watch a potential tragedy unfold. The storm intensified, as if matching the growing tension on the tarmac. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the faces of the growing crowd of witnesses. Among them was James Chen, Sarah's teenage son, who had been waiting at the airport to pick up his mother. An aspiring filmmaker, he had immediately recognized the significance of what was unfolding and began capturing footage with his professional camera. Barrett's body camera continued recording, its red light blinking steadily in the rain. What it captured next would become crucial evidence, not just of this incident, but of a pattern of behavior that the department had ignored for months. The officer's hand gripped his holster tighter as he took another step forward, seemingly oblivious to the multiple witnesses and recordings. In the control tower, Randy Martinez was already on the phone with Police Chief Gloria Matthews, his voice urgent but controlled. "Chief, we've got a situation here that's about to go viral. Barrett's confronting a pilot who has full clearance, and it's not looking good." Chief Matthews, who had been considering Barrett for mandatory counseling, felt her stomach sink. She immediately grabbed her keys and headed for the airport. What no one knew was that Barrett's son, Tyler, was among those watching the incident unfold through social media. One of the airport workers had started a live stream, and the 16-year-old recognized his father immediately. As he watched his father's behavior, years of built-up resentment began to crack, revealing something unexpected: concern for the man he had been so angry with. Marcus Thompson maintained his composure, drawing on years of experience handling crisis situations. His mind flashed to the sensitive medical supplies in the cargo hold, knowing that every minute of delay could have serious consequences. But he also recognized something in Barrett's eyes, a pain that went beyond this moment, beyond this confrontation. Sarah Chen had quietly moved closer, her legal mind already formulating strategies. But it was her humanity that recognized this situation needed more than legal intervention. She caught Marcus's eye, a silent communication passing between them. They both understood that the next few moments would define not just this incident, but potentially the lives of everyone involved. Through the terminal windows, Mayor Rodriguez had arrived and was watching the scene unfold. Her campaign promises about police reform and community healing now faced their first real test. She reached for her phone, not to call for additional officers, but to contact someone she believed could help de-escalate the situation: Dr. Michael Barrett, Officer Barrett's brother, and, unknowingly, the surgeon waiting for those medical supplies. The rain continued to pour, but a strange silence had fallen over the crowd. It was the kind of silence that comes before a pivotal moment, when everyone present can sense that something significant is about to happen. Officer Barrett's next action would either escalate the situation beyond repair or open the door for a very different kind of resolution. In that moment, as lightning flashed once again across the sky, a new voice cut through the tension. It came from somewhere in the crowd, and its words would begin to unravel everything Officer Barrett thought he knew about this night. But before that voice could finish its revelation, another unexpected development would force everyone to confront their prejudices, fears, and assumptions in ways they never expected. The voice that cut through the tension belonged to Dr. Michael Barrett, who had rushed to the airport after the mayor's call. "James, stop," he shouted, pushing through the crowd. "That blood supply you're holding up? It's for Tommy. Your nephew needs that surgery tonight." The words seemed to hover in the rain-filled air, their weight pressing down on Officer Barrett's shoulders as the reality of the situation began to sink in. But before Officer Barrett could process this revelation, another crucial piece of information emerged. Young Emma Mills, who had broken away from her mother's grasp, ran toward Marcus and Barrett, clutching her drawing. "Look, Captain Marcus has the same picture as you," she called out, holding up her artwork. In her innocent haste, she had spotted something in Barrett's patrol car, an identical pilot's photo, weathered and worn, visible through the passenger window. The resemblance was uncanny, and suddenly the pieces started falling into place. Marcus Thompson wasn't just any pilot. He had served in the same Air Force squadron as Barrett's late father, flying rescue missions during natural disasters. The photo in Barrett's car was of his father with his squadron, including a young Marcus Thompson, taken just months before the elder Barrett's final flight. Sarah Chen watched the scene unfold, her legal pad forgotten in her hands. This wasn't just about racial bias anymore. It was about pain, loss, and the ways grief can blind us to our own actions. She caught Randy Martinez's eye in the control tower, who nodded grimly. The airport's security cameras were capturing every moment of this increasingly complex situation. Thunder cracked overhead as Officer Barrett's hand finally moved away from his holster. His face showed a conflict of emotions: shame, recognition, and something deeper, more painful. The body camera's red light continued to blink, recording what would soon become a watershed moment for police departments across the country. In the growing crowd, Tyler Barrett had arrived at the airport, having followed the live stream. He stood silently watching his father, seeing for the first time not the angry man who had driven his family apart, but someone struggling with demons he'd never fully understood. The teenager's presence would soon become another crucial element in the unfolding drama. Mayor Rodriguez had made her way onto the tarmac, accompanied by Chief Matthews. They held back, recognizing that this situation needed to play out without official intervention. The mayor's body language spoke volumes. This was exactly the kind of moment that could either tear a community apart or become a catalyst for real change. The medical supplies in the plane's cargo hold took on new significance as Dr. Barrett explained the urgency of Tommy's situation. Every minute of delay could impact the surgery's success, adding another layer of tension to an already charged atmosphere. Marcus Thompson stood firm, his military training evident in his stance, but his eyes showed compassion for the man who had just minutes ago threatened his safety. Mrs. Whitman had stopped recording, her phone dropping to her side as tears mixed with the rain on her face. She saw in this moment echoes of civil rights confrontations from her youth, but also the possibility of something she had spent her life fighting for, real, meaningful change born from understanding. The storm reached its peak intensity, wind whipping across the tarmac, but nobody moved. The tableau held everyone frozen. Officer Barrett, his hand now trembling at his side. Marcus Thompson, standing tall in his captain's uniform, young Emma with her drawing. Tyler watching his father, Dr. Barrett holding the medical information for his son's surgery, and Sarah Chen, whose legal expertise was about to be overshadowed by her human insight into what needed to happen next. In the control tower, Randy Martinez received an urgent weather update. The storm was intensifying, and they had minutes, at most, to get that blood supply to the hospital. The time for confrontation was over. Now it was about saving a young boy's life. But the way this situation would resolve itself would have implications far beyond Cedar Grove Regional Airport. As lightning illuminated the scene one more time, Officer Barrett took a step forward. His next words would determine everything, not just the immediate outcome of this confrontation, but the future of his career, his relationship with his son, and his role in the community. Behind him, Chief Matthews held her breath, knowing that her next actions would need to balance justice with compassion. The moment hummed suspended in the rain-soaked air, pregnant with possibility. Then Officer Barrett began to speak, his voice cracking with emotion, but before he could finish his first sentence, something happened that would transform this confrontation from a potential tragedy into something none of them could have anticipated. A moment that would be remembered and studied for years to come. The unexpected moment came as Officer Barrett's voice broke. "You flew with my father," he said, his words barely audible above the storm. "You were there that day, weren't you? His last flight." The revelation struck like lightning across the tarmac. Marcus Thompson's face softened with recognition. "James Barrett's son," he said quietly. "I should have known. You have his eyes." In that moment, young Emma's drawing fluttered in the wind. A child's illustration of an airplane flying through a storm, helping people. It was eerily similar to the worn photograph in Barrett's patrol car, showing his father's rescue mission. The connection was undeniable, and the weight of the past pressed down on both men with devastating clarity. "Your father saved my life that day," Marcus continued, his voice steady despite the rain. "He gave up his seat on the rescue helicopter so I could get medical attention. He took the next flight instead, the one that went down." The words hung in the air as Officer Barrett's hand fell completely away from his holster, his shoulders sagging with the release of years of misdirected anger. Tyler Barrett stepped forward from the crowd, witnessing his father's transformation. The teenager had never heard this story before, had never understood the real source of his father's pain. Dr. Michael Barrett moved closer to his brother, medical charts in hand, watching as years of familial tension began to unravel in the rain. But time was still against them. Randy Martinez's voice crackled over the airport speaker system. "Final weather warning. Ground all aircraft in 10 minutes. The urgency of young Tommy's waiting surgery snapped everyone back to the present moment. Officer Barrett looked at the medical supplies, then at his brother, and finally at Marcus Thompson. What happened next would be viewed millions of times on social media. Officer Barrett didn't just stand down. He took action. "I'll escort the medical transport to the hospital myself," he announced, already moving to his patrol car. "Captain Thompson, please accept my deepest apologies. Let's get this blood supply where it needs to go." Sarah Chen quickly organized the remaining passengers' transportation while Chief Matthews approached with a decision to make. But before she could speak, Officer Barrett turned to her. "Chief, I know what needs to happen here. After we save my nephew's life, I'll accept whatever consequences come my way. I need help, and it's time I admitted that." The next few hours became a blur of activity. The police escort rushed the medical supplies through the storm to Cedar Grove General. Young Tommy's surgery was successful, thanks to the timely arrival of the blood supply. But it was what happened afterward that truly transformed this story from a potential tragedy into something meaningful. 1 week later, at a packed town hall meeting, Officer Barrett stood before the community. His son Tyler sat in the front row, next to Marcus Thompson, who had flown back specifically for this moment. Barrett didn't just apologize. He shared his story of grief, pain, and the healing that began on that stormy night. His words would later become part of a national police training program on bias and emotional trauma. Mayor Rodriguez seized the moment to implement comprehensive police reform, with Officer Barrett and Marcus Thompson surprisingly working together to develop new training protocols. The program would eventually be adopted by departments across the country, with the airport confrontation serving as a powerful teaching tool. But the story's most powerful twist came 3 months later. Officer Barrett, after completing intensive counseling and bias training, returned to duty with a new assignment. He became Cedar Grove's first police community liaison officer, working directly with local pilots and aviation programs to build bridges between law enforcement and the community. The final scene that played out on social media showed Barrett and Thompson together at Cedar Grove Regional Airport, launching a youth aviation program for underprivileged kids. Among the first students was Tyler Barrett, wearing his grandfather's pilot wings, the same ones Marcus Thompson had worn that stormy night. Young Emma Mills's drawing now hangs in the airport terminal, framed alongside the historical photo of Barrett's father and Thompson's rescue mission. Below it, a simple plaque reads, "Sometimes the storms we fear most bring us exactly where we need to be." The security footage, body camera video, and witness recordings of that night became part of a larger narrative about confronting bias, healing trauma, and finding redemption in unexpected places. But perhaps the most poignant moment was captured in a simple cell phone photo. Officer Barrett and Captain Thompson standing together in front of a small plane, both smiling as Tyler Barrett took his first flying lesson. As this story spread across the country, it sparked conversations about police reform, racial bias, and the power of human connection. But in Cedar Grove, that was remembered as the night the storm brought together two men bound by history, and how their confrontation led not to tragedy, but to transformation. The changes that began that night continued to ripple outward, touching lives far beyond the small regional airport where it all began. Copyrightory, the story's impact continued to grow in unexpected ways. 1 year after that stormy night, Cedar Grove Regional Airport hosted a special ceremony. Occasion? The inauguration of the Barrett-Thompson Fellowship for Aviation and Community Service, a program that would change countless lives in ways no one could have predicted. Officer James Barrett, now Sergeant Barrett, stood at the podium, his recovered confidence evident in his stance. But it was the person standing beside him that caused murmurs of amazement through the crowd. His son Tyler, wearing a cadet pilot's uniform, had just completed his first solo flight under the mentorship of none other than Captain Marcus Thompson. The ceremony took an unexpected turn when Sarah Chen approached the podium. The civil rights attorney had worked tirelessly over the past year, not to pursue legal action, but to help develop a groundbreaking police training program. "What happened here wasn't just about one night or two men," she began. "It was about how pain can blind us and how understanding can heal us." But the real surprise came when young Emma Mills, now 7, stepped forward with an updated version of her drawing. This time, it showed two planes flying side by side through a storm, helping each other. The artwork would become the official logo of the fellowship program, symbolizing the partnership that had grown from confrontation. Dr. Michael Barrett stood proudly with his son Tommy, now fully recovered, who had become the program's unofficial mascot. The medical emergency that had brought everyone together that night had evolved into a partnership between the police department and local hospitals, with officers now regularly escorting emergency medical transports. The ceremony's most powerful moment came when Chief Matthews announced her retirement and her controversial choice for her replacement. To everyone's astonishment, she recommended creating a joint leadership position, with Sergeant Barrett and Captain Thompson serving as co-directors of a new community safety and emergency response division. Mayor Rodriguez, who had won re-election largely due to the success of the police reform programs, revealed another surprise. Cedar Grove Regional Airport would become the hub for a new emergency response network, combining law enforcement, medical transport, and civilian aviation. The program would be named after Barrett's father and would train officers and pilots to work together during crisis. But the story's most unexpected twist emerged during the ceremony's closing moments. Mrs. Whitman, who had recorded the original confrontation, stepped forward with a time-worn letter she had kept secret for months. It was written by Barrett's father shortly before his final flight, addressed to his young son. In it, he spoke about a promising young pilot named Marcus Thompson and his hopes that his own son would one day understand that courage comes in many forms. The letter's contents brought both Barrett and Thompson to tears, but it was Barrett's son Tyler who provided the day's final surprise. He announced his plans to join the Air Force after graduation, following in both his grandfather's and Thompson's footsteps. The proud look exchanged between Barrett and Thompson spoke volumes about how far they had come. As the ceremony concluded, a small private plane flew overhead, trailing a banner that read "Change starts with understanding." The pilot was Randy Martinez, who had since become an instructor in the fellowship program. His wife Linda, the dispatch operator whose crucial radio call had helped defuse the original confrontation, sat in the co-pilot's seat. The story could have ended there, a neat resolution to a complex situation, but real life rarely provides such clean endings. Instead, the events at Cedar Grove sparked a national conversation about police reform and community healing. Police departments across the country began sending officers to learn from the Barrett-Thompson program. Young Emma Mills's artwork now hangs in police academies nationwide, a reminder that sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest gestures. And in Cedar Grove, every storm brings a reminder of that night when two men found an unexpected path to redemption. The final scene that played across social media wasn't of confrontation or tension, but of hope. It showed Sergeant Barrett and Captain Thompson in the cockpit of a training aircraft, with Tyler at the controls and young Emma in the back seat, all of them smiling as they soared through clear skies. Below them, Cedar Grove Regional Airport stood as a testament to how one stormy night of confrontation had transformed into a legacy of understanding, healing, and hope for generations to come. As the story spread, it became more than just a viral video or a cautionary tale. It became a blueprint for change, showing how even the darkest storms can lead to the brightest new beginnings. In Cedar Grove, they still say that sometimes it takes a storm to clear the air, and that the most powerful changes often come from the most unexpected moments of connection. 5 years after that transformative night at Cedar Grove Regional Airport, the ripple effects continued to touch lives in remarkable ways. The Barrett-Thompson Fellowship had grown from a local initiative into a nationally recognized program, with graduates serving in police departments and aviation programs across the country. But it was the personal transformations that truly measured the program's success. Tyler Barrett, now a commissioned Air Force officer and pilot, often returned to Cedar Grove to mentor young cadets alongside his father. The relationship between father and son had healed and deepened, built on a foundation of understanding that emerged from that stormy confrontation. Their story became a powerful testament to how facing one's prejudices could mend not just professional relationships, but personal ones as well. Emma Mills, now 12, had become the youngest student in the youth aviation program. Her original drawing, which captured the essence of that pivotal night, had inspired a children's book series about overcoming prejudice and finding common ground. The books, co-authored by Sarah Chen and illustrated by Emma herself, were now standard reading in schools across the country. Sergeant James Barrett's transformation became a case study in police reform. His journey from a troubled officer to a respected community leader demonstrated how confronting personal trauma and bias could lead to profound change. He regularly spoke at police academies, sharing his story with a rawness and honesty that touched hearts and changed minds. Captain Marcus Thompson continued flying but also devoted significant time to the fellowship program. His patient approach to teaching and mentoring reflected the same composure he had shown that stormy night. "Sometimes the hardest landings teach us the most important lessons," he would often tell his students, a phrase that became the program's unofficial motto. The elderly Whitmans, whose video at first brought national attention to the incident, established a scholarship fund for minority students interested in aviation or law enforcement. Mrs. Whitman's civil rights experience from the 1960s provided a powerful historical context for the program's mission of bringing communities together. Dr. Michael Barrett and his son Tommy became regular visitors at the airport, with Tommy developing his own passion for aviation. The medical transport program that began with that emergency blood delivery had evolved into a sophisticated network of police-assisted medical flights, saving countless lives across the region. Mayor Rodriguez's police reform initiatives, inspired by the airport incident, became a model for other cities. The emphasis on understanding personal trauma and its impact on professional behavior revolutionized police training nationwide. Cedar Grove's policy changes were studied and adapted by departments across the country. Randy and Linda Martinez, the air traffic controller and dispatch operator whose quick thinking helped prevent tragedy that night, had become instrumental in training new emergency responders. Their experience highlighted the crucial role of support staff in crisis prevention and resolution. But perhaps the most profound impact was seen in the daily operations at Cedar Grove Regional Airport. The once tense relationship between law enforcement and the aviation community had transformed into a model of cooperation. Officers and pilots worked together seamlessly, their shared commitment to public service strengthened by the lessons learned from that stormy night. Chief Matthews' vision of joint leadership had proven remarkably successful. The partnership between law enforcement and aviation experts created a more effective, empathetic approach to public safety. The program's success attracted attention from departments worldwide, with delegations visiting Cedar Grove to study their methods. As for Officer Barrett's father's letter, its contents became part of the fellowship's opening ceremony. Each new class of trainees heard the words of a man who gave his life saving others, and whose legacy lived on through the unlikely partnership between his son and the pilot he saved. The story's impact reached far beyond Cedar Grove. Social media platforms frequently shared updates about the program's success, with the original confrontation video now followed by countless stories of positive change. The hashtag #CedarGroveChange became a symbol for community transformation and healing. Sarah Chen's legal expertise helped shape new policies that emphasized de-escalation and understanding over confrontation. She often remarked that the most powerful legal changes come not from courtroom battles, but from moments of genuine human connection. The airport terminal, once the site of tension and conflict, became a community hub. Regular events brought together police officers, pilots, and community members, while the walls displayed a growing collection of photographs documenting the program's success stories. Emma's original drawing remained centerpiece, reminding everyone how a moment of crisis became a catalyst for change. As the sun set on another busy day at Cedar Grove Regional Airport, Sergeant Barrett and Captain Thompson often found themselves sharing quiet moments in the control tower, watching planes take off and land. Their conversations would drift between the past and future, acknowledging how far they'd come while planning for where they still needed to go. The story of that stormy night continues to inspire new generations of officers and pilots. It serves as a powerful reminder that even in our darkest moments, the potential for transformation exists. The badge and the wings, once symbols of division, now represent a united commitment to service and understanding. In the end, Cedar Grove's story wasn't just about a racist cop and a black pilot. It was about how confronting our deepest prejudices and pain can lead to healing and growth. It showed how one moment of potential tragedy could transform into a legacy of hope and change. As planes continue to take off and land at Cedar Grove Regional Airport, they carry with them the message that sometimes the most powerful changes come from the storms we never saw coming. And so, the story that began with tension on a rainy night continues to unfold in unexpected ways, touching lives and changing perspectives, one flight at a time. In Cedar Grove, they learned that true change doesn't just happen in dramatic moments. It happens in the quiet decisions we make every day to understand each other better, to face our fears and prejudices, and to believe that even the darkest storms can lead us to clearer skies.